This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of Chandler, Arizona, Candace Heiken, who is the Executive Director of Celebrate Education. And I came across her, probably about a month ago or so, and learned about what they do and how they help families and schools. And I was like, okay, this is a perfect one for the podcast. And so here we are. We're on the podcast and we're going to talk all about this. And I don't want to spoil anything. So let me do this first. I'm going to pass it off to Candace to introduce herself real quick, and then we'll jump into some questions that I have for her. So Candace, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks, Mitchell. I appreciate you having me.
We're going to have a lot of fun today. And I start with the same question for everyone, which I don't know if you know this one's coming, but it's coming. Here we go. So if I was to visit you in Chandler, Arizona, what would you say, Mitchell? You need to eat this and do this to experience Chandler, Arizona, or even the surrounding areas, whatever you would say, Mitchell, you got to do.
All right. I think as far as a good place to eat, I have two favorites, but one is nearby in Queen Creek, and it's the Olive Mill restaurant, which they have an olive grove, I think it's called, but it's really an incredible place. You can go and play bocce ball. They've got live music. You sit outside in the grove, and it's a really fun. The food's great, but the experience is really fantastic. So that's probably my favorite. My second favorite is Postino's, which is a little wine cafe, but it's got this amazing outdoor patio in downtown Gilbert. And so that would be my backup suggestion. And as far as things to do, I feel like you can't ever go wrong with the botanical garden. And I know that, there are a lot of botanical gardens in the country, but this one is really special because it's a desert botanical garden. So you've got an entire, agave garden, and of course all the huge saguaro, and it's a really magical place. But then if you're into quirky things, there's a place called the Mystery Castle that's over by South Mountain. And it has, it's a castle of sorts that a man built for his daughter as a surprise. And he built it out of all sorts of found materials. So like old car parts and recycled flagpoles and just random things. And it's just a really eclectic mix of things. It's quite a sight. So that's kind of a fun, quirky little place to go when you're in town.
Okay, perfect. Well, I have best friends of ours in Queen Creek. So it sounds like that'd be a perfect little thing. See them, go to this olive place, get some food, and then go check out some of these, the botanical garden. All right. See, this is good. I use this to reference back to if I ever visit these areas, be like, this local told me I needed to go to these places. So, all right. Thank you for that, Candace. To dive in today, before I jump into some of the questions I have, how about kind of just share a little bit of your story of how you got to where you are today and why you started Celebrate and what you guys are doing there, and then dive into some of the questions I have for you. Sound good?
Perfect. Yeah. So I've been in education for about 25 years now, and my background is both psychology and education. But for the last 13 years or so, I've been working with families and educators and students on executive function skill development. And we started primarily helping students who were struggling to learn. And we really focused on particular content areas. But then we realized pretty quickly that for so many students, it really isn't the content, it's more the skill behind learning. And so I always like to give the example that it's not really the student who can't understand how to do his math homework, it's the student who can't find it in his backpack to turn it in. And so we really started working with students and educators on how to develop some of these skills and how to help students really understand how to learn.
That's awesome. Well, I love that you're doing that. Thank you for obviously 25 years in education. I don't know how it's possible when you're 32 years old, but that's amazing that you've been in education that long. So,
Yeah. I started early. Yeah.
so obviously I'm new to this because we talked about this on our first call that we had together, but and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's new to this and learning about kind of what all you guys offer and what you guys do. For all of us, what are executive functions? I was really fascinated by this when you and I first talked about it, but what are executive functions?
Well, executive functions are essentially the brain's mechanism to help us complete a task in order to reach a goal. So it's been compared to like the air traffic control center of the brain. So it's what's allowing us to be able to get organized, follow through, get started, manage our emotions, remember what we're doing, stay focused. And so it's helping us do all of those things we need to do to be able to learn.
And so obviously I can see this affecting students for sure, but obviously I can see that affecting adults too. But obviously we'll start with the student side, but I'm sure this can also bleed into adulthood if we don't maybe take care of it or try and get it under wraps in childhood. So how are these executive functions actually impacting students that you guys are dealing with and seeing on a regular basis?
Well, you can probably imagine in the realm of executive function skills, you generally have the behavioral pieces, which look at things like self-control, self-regulation. So whether students are able to manage themselves so that they can access learning. And so you've got that behavioral side, but then you have the emotional pieces like flexible thinking and emotional control and being able to manage those emotions to be able to learn. But then you have the cognitive pieces. And so those include things like working memory, the ability to stay focused and manage distractions, which of course we know in this day and age, managing distractions is a huge challenge for a lot of students and adults. But then task initiation. So just getting started on your work, being able to make it feel manageable. And then things like time management and organization. So you can imagine that students who struggle with those sorts of skills really struggle to be able to access the curriculum, pay attention. A lot of times because they're struggling with those skills, they tend to get in trouble in the classroom. So a lot of times they're, sent out of the classroom, or there's some situation in where they no longer have the ability to listen to what's going on and learn in that way. So it affects students in a lot of different ways.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. Is there any correlation with this, with ADD, ADHD, and different things, or is it not even the same thing?
Yeah, no, there's a strong correlation between executive function challenges, ADHD, autism. You also see it a lot with students who struggle with anxiety disorders, depression. There are actually quite a few comorbidities, any type of brain injuries, any sort of traumatic brain injuries. you'll see a lot of struggle with executive function. So you see it in quite a few diagnoses, but most frequently you would notice it with students who've been diagnosed with ADHD.
Okay. Is there any commonality that you've seen for like, okay, let's say something that could keep kids from struggling with this that maybe parents can do from birth, toddler age? Is there anything out there like, oh, well, this food affects this, or this, the way you treat your kids, anything specific that comes to mind to go, yeah, this is a big thing we've seen. If you're doing this, or this is actively happening, this is something they're probably going to end up struggling with. Is there any type of correlation like that?
Well, I think one of the most encouraging things about executive function struggles and challenges is that the research is pretty clear that they can be trained. And so it's something that you can address, even if a student is, in high school and struggling with executive functions. There's a series of strategies that you can be practicing and using to develop a habit and then develop that skill. And so from those early ages on, we can be really helping students develop those executive function skills. So from the really early ages, just helping students understand simple patterns of behavior and how, different ways that they could do things, helping students set up routines. And so those are some of the simple things that we can do when they're younger, but throughout adolescence, they're continuing to develop executive function skills naturally. That's just the natural progression. But we can be setting up different strategies and putting things in place for them to practice. But that's one of the pieces that's most important, is that for students who are struggling with executive function skills, they have to have an opportunity to practice it. They have to be able to practice it over and over, because of course we all know that developing a habit takes time. And so just because we tell a student, pay attention, or get started on your work, doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to do that. So even if they really, really want to, and that's one of the things that we've found over the years, that students who struggle with executive functions often get labeled as students who are maybe unmotivated or lazy or defiant in some way, when really they often don't know how to do what we're asking them to do. So a student who struggles with task initiation, if we tell them to get started on their work because we just handed them a sheet of paper and they should know what to do with it, for so many kids, that is so overwhelming to them. And the simple strategy for that is to task chunk, right? Break it into more manageable pieces and help them understand, when I say get started, the first thing I want you to do is just write your name up at the top of the paper. And then the next thing I want you to do is this, right? So that we're breaking it into manageable pieces. And now the student really can get started on the work rather than just sitting there feeling overwhelmed and not really sure where to start. It feels too big.
Is there any correlation with like screen time for like kids at a young age that makes this maybe more difficult? Like if they've been playing video games for a long time or watching TV, I know the kids I've been around, even my own son, if there's too much one day, you can tell there's like, he's harder to focus, harder to pay attention, to try and get them down from like, I feel like almost like a high of like flashy lights and all that stuff. Is that a piece of this too, that you see like, ooh, if there's a lot of screen time, is we have a harder time with some of this as well?
There have been a lot of studies recently about some of the causation for executive function challenges. And there's a lot of disagreement on it as far as which factors play the biggest role. I mean, some are just simply hereditary, and you see, students who are struggling with executive functions, and you often see a parent who struggles with executive function. So you see that sort of thing. But of course, the increase in screen time, and that has certainly been known to cause struggles with managing distractions and paying attention. We all seem to have a little bit shorter attention span these days. So I think, yeah, there are some correlations with that. And then just, we're all so busy, families are so busy, everyone's busy. And so a lot of it comes down to a lack of modeling and those conversations. So kind of going back to what you said about how can parents help, a lot of it just comes down to explaining to our kids what we're doing. And that we really teach that in the classroom as well when we're talking with teachers. We can be modeling executive function skills all day long because we're using executive function skills all day long. So whether we're showing a student how we felt overwhelmed about something and here's how we managed it, or this was something I felt really frustrated about and here's what I did about it, or I couldn't find what I was looking for, and I realized that this particular thing needed its own special home. And so here's where it's now going to live so that the next time I can find it when I need it. And so just things like that we just do, and we really don't think too much about it. For a student who's struggling with executive function, if we're just communicating that with them, they start to see that, oh, yeah, okay, there's a system I can put in place. There's a strategy for how I can do that too. And so that's one of the biggest pieces is just that conversation and that modeling.
Okay. And I know you've kind of already, I feel like started to answer this one. We'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper on it. Like, how do you fix it? So what are some strategies that maybe parents can do, but also, of course, teachers and schools, and what are some ways maybe you guys do with your company that you help with this specifically?
Yeah, over the years, as we were helping students start to develop some of those skills, we definitely recognized that this was a need in the classroom as well, that teachers were struggling with behaviors in the classroom. And generally what we do with that, with classroom management, is we have a list of expectations that we have for students. And when they don't meet those expectations, we have some sort of consequence that comes in play, which is reasonable unless the student doesn't know how to meet those expectations that we have for them. They really, truly don't know how to do what we're asking them to do. And so several years ago, we developed a curriculum of lessons that looks at these different areas that we mentioned before, the behavioral, the emotional, and the cognitive pieces, because they're often working in conjunction with one another. The student who is having a meltdown under his desk, a lot of times that has to do with the fact that he can't find what he needs in his backpack, or that he is struggling to get started on his work. And so we look at it overall, and when we look at how we can help students in the school, the first thing we have to look at is what are the specific behaviors and where are they coming from? So a lot of times we kind of lump things together and we'll say, well, this student really struggles with time management, or this student really struggles with organization. But what exactly do you mean by that? Do you mean that the student is really struggling to estimate how much time something's going to take, and so they don't have enough time to finish? Or is this student procrastinating, and so then they aren't able to manage their time and finish? So there are really specific behaviors that we see students doing. And so if we're able to just step back and look at the student and observe what are the specific behaviors that we see them doing in each of these areas, then we can target our instruction and start to give them strategies. And that's one of the areas that we've seen educators really struggle with, is that as educators, we tend to teach the things that we know really well or that we do really well at. But sometimes that isn't what that student needs. And so if we can step back and say, this student is struggling with flexible thinking, right? They get stuck in a thought and then they can't move past it. And this is, we see this struggle that they have with it, and it affects their ability to learn. What can we do about that? And so if we're able to identify what is the behavior, then we can start to think of the strategies that we can use to put in place. And a lot of times those strategies are really simple. It's just about giving them a way to overcome that. If you're stuck with an idea, what's a way to get your brain unstuck? How can you start to think of something different? What are some ways to do that? And we give students ways to do that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we have to give them ways to practice it. They have to be able to keep practicing it. So we talk a lot about action plans, right? Like, what is the action plan beyond that? How are they supposed to practice the strategy that we just gave them? And then another piece that's really important is the metacognition, right? So that they gain an awareness of what it is they're doing and whether it's working and what they could do to change it if it's not. And so that's where we as teachers can say, okay, I gave you a strategy for how to do this yesterday. How do you feel like that's going for you? And what can we do differently? Because that increases the student engagement. Now they take some ownership in what they're doing and how they're doing it, because we're asking them for their feedback on it, for them to start thinking about it and owning it. And so when we look at, incorporating that executive function instruction, those are some of the biggest pieces. Being able to identify the need, target your instruction, and give some sort of strategy, and then monitor the progress. Are we seeing the type of behavior change that we want to see? And if not, how can we tweak it? How can we adjust it? Because the same strategy is not going to work the same way for every student. We have to be able to have some flexibility there.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. Is there one specific one that you see pop up, maybe most common in students that you see that they're struggling with? Maybe it's being on time or handing in their work, or is there one they're like, man, this is the one more than any other that we see them struggling with?
No, I don't think so. And I think, in our program that we have 8 executive function skills that we look at. And within each of those 8, there are 8 specific behaviors or 8 challenges. So a total of 64 challenges. And they're things like the student doesn't know when it's his turn to speak, right? Or this student has a really hard time calming down after they get really worked up. Or this student never has what he needs when he comes to class. And so you tend to see different things, similar challenges in different age and grade categories, things that they tend to struggle with. And as they, for the little ones, a lot of times they're really struggling with some of those self-control, self-regulation, and self-monitoring skills. But as they get older, you start to see things like not knowing how to study for a test, not knowing how to take good notes. And so all of that comes from that task initiation, planning, organization, all of those executive function skills work into those sorts of things like preparing for a test. You need several of those skills to be able to prepare well for a test.
And so with all of this, I know you guys you've talked about like the instruction of this. So kind of dive into that real quick of like, what is executive function instruction and how do you do it? Like, what are some of I know you've touched on this just a little bit already, but maybe we dive into this one a little bit more. What exactly is that? How does it work?
Yeah, it's really about identifying where the deficiency is. Which behavior are you targeting? Which behavior is impacting the student's ability to learn? So if it's the student interrupts often and doesn't seem to know when it's his turn to speak, right? So that's what's happening. Then the instruction portion is really about engaging the student, helping the student understand what the problem is and why it's a problem, and then introducing some sort of strategy for how to overcome that. So what are some, for a student who doesn't understand when it's his turn to speak, it's helpful to help that student recognize different situations. So for instance, I've asked you a question and then I've stopped talking. Is it your turn to speak? Right? Or I'm explaining something to the class and you have something really important to say. is it your turn to speak? And so really helping them understand different situations where maybe yes, it is, or no, it isn't, and helping them identify what that is. And then putting a really simple strategy in place where maybe they've got a card on their desk where they can have some different examples of, yes, it's my turn, or no, it's not. And what do I do when it's not my turn? How can I hold my thought in my head so that when it is my turn, I can share what I wanted to say? And so providing some strategies for students to do that. And then, like I mentioned before, giving them opportunities to practice it. Redirecting. When they forget and they interrupt, that's a nice time to just simply point at that card that's on their desk and remind them to use one of their strategies they have for holding their thought. And so that's really what the instruction is all about, is identifying what the problem behavior is, providing strategies, and giving opportunities to practice.
And if somebody wanted to kind of like dive more into this and learn more, is there some resources maybe on your website, or do they, if they wanted to talk with somebody from your team, is the best, if like a teacher's like, okay, we have some students that would really benefit from this help, some of this, what you guys offer, what's the best way they can either get in touch with you, learn more about this, and find out more?
Yeah, we have a plethora of resources on our website. So if you go to 𝒂𝒏𝒅𝒂𝒄𝒆, and 𝒂𝒏𝒅𝒏, I know that sounds made up, but it's actually an old-fashioned word we just don't use very much anymore. That means to think or ponder to make a good decision, to celebrate on something. So it looks like celebrate, but with an R. So 𝒂𝒏𝒅𝒂𝒄𝒆. On our blog, we have all sorts of resources that help identify what is the challenge, gives all sorts of different strategies and ways to help students with these different 8 executive functions, ways to practice. There's an entire series on how to model those executive functions. And so if you are a school leader and you want to help your teachers just start to incorporate some of that in their classroom by modeling and explaining to their students what they're doing, there's an entire series of how to model each of those 8 executive functions. And so you'll find a lot of resources there that you can use just to help get started on providing some of that executive function instruction and support in your school.
And if a school needs more help and like suggestions or support, do they just reach out to you guys directly through your website?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. So our contact information is on the website, and we are helping schools and districts all the time. Just answer some questions and get a good idea on ways to solve some of these struggles that their teachers are having with behaviors. And then, of course, we help implement our program that helps you identify those areas and then gives you the specific strategy. It works with our educators, whether it's, at the classroom level, whether students are struggling at that classroom level, or some of our students who maybe have MTSS or RTI, and we need some way to approach it tier 2. And then, of course, for students who are have executive function goals written into IEPs and that sort of thing in special education, there's a way to progress monitor for that and manage all of that material there too. So that's certainly something we can help with if anyone needs that extra support. But there are plenty of resources there to help get people started and to support their teams if that's what they're looking to do.
Awesome. Well, I got one final question for you, Candace. For all the school leaders listening, I want you to share one final piece of advice for the school leaders listening. What would that piece of advice be?
I think my one piece of advice would just simply be to acknowledge that there's a mindset that we can change a bit when it comes to educators, that we can help teachers understand that students aren't necessarily lazy or unmotivated or defiant, that a lot of times that behavior is coming from a skill deficiency, that they don't know how to do what we want them to do. And so if we can start to understand that and look at it that way, it gives us just a much more positive and productive way to address those behaviors that are causing all kinds of problems in the classroom, because now we can look at it as a way to help them, right? A way to teach them, support them, and give them a way to behave differently rather than kind of labeling them as a trouble kid, right? And so I think just helping your team shift that mindset is really, really impactful and powerful. We've seen that over and over again in schools when their teachers start to look at behaviors in that way.
Love it. Well, Candace, obviously, thank you for all the years, again, in education that you've done. And thank you for the organization you have that is helping schools, helping families and kids and parents, all that with this executive function that we're talking about. So thank you. And thank you for taking time out of your day to hop on the podcast and teach me and teach our listeners about what you do and how we can help children thrive and be better. So thank you again for your time today.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I thank you for everything that you're doing for schools and leaders. So it was great to chat with you.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Candace for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what she's doing over at her company, Celebrate, wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to help students, families, and schools with executive functions. And they're doing some great work. And I know they're going to continue to do that. So, of course, please go visit their website, celebrate.education, to find out more about them and what they're doing. And as always, guys, I want to make sure you are getting at least one thing away from each podcast episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And I'm sure you're able to get at least one from today's episode. But before you go, I do want to highlight our 3 free resources that we have available here at School Success. And, of course, the number one that you're listening to right now is one of those. It's the School Success Podcast. We are dropping episodes every single Monday morning. So if you love our content, obviously we'd love a 5-star review. Shameless plug right there. We'd love that. But also, if you are not subscribed yet, give it a subscribe. I know you've heard the spiel before from us, but probably any other podcast you listen to. But you don't want to miss any, then subscribe to it. Love the 5-star reviews, all that fun stuff. But we work really hard, the whole team does, on getting these podcasts out to you guys. And hope you're growing and learning from these, because we do enjoy putting them out, and we hope you guys are enjoying them too. The second free resource is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner, there is a button, the School Success Report. We send that out every single week with different articles our team has either written or we found online to put together in one full report that you can read to kind of grow in education and see what is going on in this world every single week. We want to make sure you're getting that in your inbox each and every week. So schoolsuccessmakers.com. Get the School Success Report. And lastly, the third one is our free Facebook community, School Success Makers. We'd love to see you join that. Again, completely free. I'm personally in there and would love to see you in there as well. Get to know other people in education, ask questions, and get some community around you, because we all know community is very important, but you have to work at building that up. And this is a great way to do that, and it doesn't cost you anything. So go join our community. And I think that's all I got for you guys today. So we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.